welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a Little Blue Book. It is Little Blue Book number 1270, and it is entitled Visits Among the Mormons. And it is written by Fred Bair, along with several other writers. This is part 2, and we left off, let's see, I think we left off at the top of page 17 here, and we'll pick up from there. Every effort is made at the university to curb new ideas. A liberal cannot remain long on its faculty. The debate coach for the past 2 years, an aggressively liberal young chap who believes that society can be redeemed if only our universities and colleges can be made free, has been called on the carpet by the head of his department no less than 6 times, where he was censured and threatened with dismissal. Once it was because he read an article to his classes from the American Mercury, another time because his debaters were permitted to discuss birth control, another because he was alleged to have called Coolidge a jackass, another because he told a student it would take more than the scoffs to answer Judge Lindsay's book, The Revolt of Modern Youth. Another because he told his students it was their business as intelligent creatures to question every assumption they held as truth, not excluding their belief in a God. And another time because he was charged with saying that suicide is a man's own business. Other members of the faculty have met with similar interferences. An assistant professor with a doctorate from Chicago urged the use of birth control measures as an economic good. The president told him, "Since I am an economist and you are not, and since I know that your conclusions on birth control are fallacious, I would suggest that you remain in your own field." A teacher of philosophy is so afraid of his job that he will not express an opinion of his own. He constantly tells his students, "Now remember, this is not my opinion I am giving you." Alert, intelligent students have contempt for this man. Rightfully, perhaps, they should have contempt for a condition that makes such a cowardly attitude necessary. The president of the dominant church of the state pounded a table viciously and said, "I will not pay taxes to support such a man on the faculty at the university." The young fellow who was the object of the denunciation had said some rather caustic things to his students about their unquestioning faith in the Bible and their implicit belief in a God. In due time he was censured by the president, who, however, disavowed any church influence. But one wonders, when he gets frightened at the rantings of the commander of the American Legion, who is there to contend that he is not also strikingly influenced by one whose power is almost unlimited? The president, like his colleagues in the profession, evades and placates, and at times approaches downright falsehood. To a member of the faculty he said, "2 members of the board of regents came to me today protesting utterances you have made, and they demanded that your resignation be called for immediately. I asked them if they could prove that you had made the statements, and they confessed they could not. I suggested that they secure proof before charges were made. The instructor began a very clever and searching investigation and discovered the following complete misrepresentation of the facts. The regents had not come to the president. The president had informed the regents, during a committee meeting, about the utterances supposedly made by the instructor. The president suggested that it might be wise to demand immediate resignation. The regents had asked the president to submit proof that the instructor had made the statements. Utah University, contrary to supposition, because Scott Nearing was permitted to speak, is not free. The radical or even liberal teacher is soon ousted. Measures are now being taken to keep them out entirely. Through questionnaires and other methods of subterfuge, attempts are made to discover, before he or she is employed, a teacher's religious, political, economic, and ethical views. Many persons believe that Utah is ready to join other colleges and universities in establishing a blacklist of undesirables. And Utah would place on that list any person who ridicules national officials, advocates of birth control, aggressive agnostics, and atheists, socialists, and other so-called Reds, and any person who is capable of so stimulating students that they become intellectually curious and inquisitive to the point of discovering that what their parents and bishops and teachers believed might be as false as the common conception that ostriches stick their heads in the sand. Utah would place on the list all persons with marked creative ability. For instance, a poet who believed that creative accomplishments was worth as much, if not more, than scholarship, and who believed that creative ability was, at least in part, a qualification to teach poetry. Utah is not free, and has no promise of soon becoming free, and as a result, the students of the University of Utah will continue to be interested in the silly and pretentious nothingness that surrounds every campus where fraternities and football teams are the chief object of discussion, and where faculty members are told, "Shut up," or "Get out." Ebenezer Hansen, Polygamist and Patriarch, by Don Lewis. Not long ago, a preposterous old man was summoned back to glory by the Lord. He had lived 67 years, but that was not enough of life for him. Unwillingly and with loud protest, he surrendered his soul to his God. Today, his huge body, draped in a robe of silk, rests in the ground, where it awaits the trumpet call that will usher in the morning of the resurrection. Ebenezer Hansen is, without a doubt, one of the most striking characters who ever lived in Arizona. He went to that country when it was a desert waste. When he left, it was a thriving, bustling, Ford-infested commonwealth. And he had played no small part in the change. He contributed his full share to the growth of population. He helped slaughter the Indians. He supervised the building of canals for irrigation. He built a town which bears his name. And, most important of all, at least to him, he was the authorized messenger of God. His death was mourned by thousands of people. His place will be a difficult one to fill. For more than 30 years, Ebenezer had been the long-whiskered patriarch of the Arizona Mormons. It had been his official duty and privilege to pronounce patriarchal blessings upon the church members who came to him. These blessings were promises direct from the Lord, given in exchange for certain works performed by his people. In these blessings he always promised a long life, it being a belief among the Mormons that longevity is a sign of favor with the Lord. It is a common belief of these people that gray hair and a long beard are signs of wisdom. All the knowledge or intelligence that might be proposed by youth. That the wisdom of the elders surpasses all the knowledge or intelligence that might be possessed by the youth. Well, I wonder why that didn't make sense. The patriarch usually offered many children and much happiness, the two of course being synonymous, to the person who would live a good life and obey the dicta of the word of wisdom. Because of shrewd guesswork and the law of averages, some of the blessings were partially fulfilled. These cases were heralded as proof of the possibility of direct communication with God and the credibility of the Mormon religion. But if the blessings given by the old patriarch did not come true, and most of them didn't, it was, to be sure, always because the person involved had not lived the good life. It was never the fault of the patriarch, never that he had missed connections with Jehovah. Ebenezer's predictions were always the word of God. Anything else would have been a dastardly presumption against divine revelation or the intelligence of the Lord. Ebenezer Hansen was a most proligerous man. He claimed 7 wives and 49 children as his own. Some people attributed to him more of both than he would claim, but it is certainty that the above-mentioned figures are none too small. Indeed, He was related, directly or indirectly, to at least 3/4 of all the members of the Mormon colony. The outstanding event of his calendar was the annual reunion at his home of the vast horde of descendants. Usually there were more than 400 persons in attendance at these carnival gatherings. The children and their children and their children came many miles, and even those who lived in other states came back home for the event. He knew each member of his family, to the newest born babe, by his name and the date of his birth. To borrow a phrase, it might be said that these reunions were annual inspections by the commanding officer. A great feast, comparable only to the Feast of the 5,000, was spread on an expansive lawn. Ebenezer, in flowing robes, sat where he could survey his progeny. His self-esteem mounted higher and higher as he observed the number increase from year to year. After the food was eaten, the Lord was praised. The favorite Mormon Sunday school song, "In Our Lovely Desert," was always sung. After an insufferably long prayer, given by himself, the patriarch would preach a mighty sermon. Whatever else was said, he never failed to come, in his concluding remarks, to something like this: "The Lord has given good to me and mine. We have been greatly blessed because we love and fear him. He has seen fit to keep our little ones true to the faith. He has given us bountiful crops. God has been good to us. He has given us a great increase. 28 babies were added to our members during this past year, and only 16 dear ones have been taken back to glory. I admonish you to keep up the good work, my children. The favorite of the Lord shall indeed replenish the earth. We are the chosen people of God. Through us Zion will be restored to this continent in the dispensation of time. 7 of our young men are now laboring in the mission fields of the church, but we should have twice that number. The peoples of the world must be won for the Lord. God has been good to me and mine. He has given me a great and good family. My reward will come in the hereafter." With God thus praised for the goodness and beseeched for further blessings, the old patriarch seemed contented. He would seat himself in his great chair upon the lawn. His young children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren would clamor about him. He had all 3 about the same age. Ebenezer cherished a picture, which had been taken of a son, a grandson, and a great-grandson of his, when all 3 were in the same grade in school. These youngsters scampered about and tickled his large ears with blades of grass. They pulled his long beard and climbed upon his huge body. He told them Indian stories and delighted in their yells and screeches. His progeny, that pack of young embryo Mormons, was his own great satisfaction. Polygamy was prohibited by Congress in the early 19s, and that would be 19 teens. The greater portion of the practice, however, continued unabated for many years afterwards. It became much more secret, to be sure, but none the less real. Ebenezer Hanson had kept his family in one mammoth house, but he was forced, soon after the law went into effect, to provide a separate home for each of his wives. Nominally, he chose wife number 1 as his mate and her home as his official headquarters, but he cohabitated with each of the other 6 in turn. His arrogance for the law became so pronounced that it was necessary for the federal officials to place him under arrest. He was refused bail inasmuch as it was rumored that he would skip to Mexico, where the less courageous had already gone. If they turned him loose after a somewhat sensational trial, during which threats against government representatives were made quite profusely by prominent Mormons, he was sent to the penitentiary. He was out in 2 years. When he returned to his people, they held a great jubilee. He was to have served 20 years, but he was released at the end of 2 years, that he might return home to die. He had either cleverly fooled the warden of the prison, or the warden's reason for the dismissal was a pretense to the public. The patriarch lived 20 years longer, and had half-dozen children. Some Mormons, those who were not polygamists and who pretended to be patriotic, derided Ebenezer for his lawlessness. To these he would reply, "The works of the Lord are good and true. I am doing his will. Someday polygamy will be made legal again. Congress cannot thwart God's will for long. I will go to jail again rather than not practice the commands of the Lord." The patriarch was both respected and feared. Respected for his ability, feared because of his power and his unscrupulous way, at times, that he used it. He could ruin the life and business of any Mormon by having him excommunicated from the church. Some people contended that he used his power to further his own interests. Others believed in him implicitly, and in the justness of all that he did. At least, his word was law. He had a powerful physique. It was claimed that he could handle any 4 ordinary men, and that he could throw a cow on his back with very little effort. He had an uncanny money-making ability, and he kept his great family in good circumstances. He did let his 6th wife live in poverty because he claimed that her youngest son had been sired by one of the high priests. If this child had been counted by the patriarch, it would have brought him his total number of children to the half-century mark, his lifelong ambition. But he was adamant and refused recognition of the boy. Ebenezer was the object of numerous puns and jokes. It seemed that anyone would laugh at a jest spoken at his expense. Even his own people, who believed in him and greatly admired him, told obscene stories that made light of his promiscuity. The cowpunchers at a nearby cattle ranch joined in this ribaldry. Their conversation, usually boisterous and hilarious, went something like this: "He's a damn good man. It would take a big man like him to handle all them women. 7 women is a steady diet. That'd be a damn sight more than I could use. He must get plenty of money for telling them fortunes. To be able to keep all them women? I couldn't even keep Bess when I was living with her down in El Paso. She simply took money in more in my salary to buy her damn clothes. Let leave feed her any? Ebenezer's just like old Geronimo, who gets a different mare for himself every goddamn day. But the boss has a hell of a time keeping Geronimo fit. He has to give him all kinds of special stuff to eat. Do you reckon that old patriarch gets anything special to eat? Some says the old bastard eats damn nigh all the raw eggs he can find. Some says as how they seed him sucking raw eggs in a chicken coop. Why, he even lives with more'n 7 women, so I've heard tell. Yeah, I heard the same. He's damn nigh a match for old Brigham Young. And that he is. Briggs simply lived in more favorable times. If polygamy comes back, right here's one puncher what's a-going to be a Mormon. Not much for me. 1 woman is too many. For my best welfare, my same judgments against women. Oh, hell, they won't have you. That's your trouble. You'd take a dozen if they'd have you. Any man would. No how. The old patriarch gets my vote and acclamation. He's a real he-man. Ebenezer's wives, the young ones, didn't stop having children until he was 75. But at that age, he was as hale and hearty as the average man at 50. When he lay on his deathbed at 87, he had the elders in to anoint him with oil and to ask the Lord to let him live to be 100. Why, he could be of good service to the Lord at 150. He wanted to live. He was afraid to die. When they took him to the cemetery, there was a procession of automobiles and buggies. Some of the saints still drive buggies. 2 miles long. Only a fifth of the people who gathered for the funeral could crowd into the tabernacle. There was room enough in the meeting house for only his direct descendants, and they numbered 1,500. Last chapter, An Intellectual Christian, written by Gaylord Du Bois. Of all the paradoxes to which our modern religious babble has given birth, perhaps the most delightful is the self-styled intellectual Christian. a standard toolkit of theological absurdities, an easy flow of words flavored with scientific jargon, and a working knowledge of the popular mind. These are his best qualifications. One might add a childlike credulity, though that is by no means necessary to his purpose. A few seminary degrees, titles of Reverend, Most Reverend, Dean, Bishop, or similar, or simply Doctor, are a splendid help, for it is necessary that he speak as one having authority, as a man of intellect. Mr. Henry P. Van Dusen, graduate of Princeton University and Union Seminary, fills most of these requirements. He is spending this year visiting the colleges of the country with a view to stimulating Christian thinking, and in his spare time he writes earnest intellectual sermons for such publications as may profit by his eloquence. In the Intercollegian for October of 1925, he gives us a charming little apology entitled Believing in God. To the query as to why he believes in God, Mr. Van Dusen replies, because he cannot help it. If this answer means anything, which seems doubtful, it means that he believes in God because he wants to believe in God. Very interesting. But our intellectual Sumerian does not leave us to meditate simply on that. He explains that he believes in God also because his mind demands an explanation of the universe. A bit presumptuous maybe, but quite comprehensive. And furthermore, because no explanation is half so satisfactory to him. Well, since human limitations are relative, let us take the case of the untutored savage, who, with equal right, demands an explanation of the earth. Suppose that we show him two pictures, one representing the view of modern science, the earth evolving through countless eons from stardust to a habitable globe, and the other representing God in the form of a man, forming the earth out of mud and water, as one would make a mud pie. Which of the two pictures will he find the more satisfactory? Undoubtedly that of the mud pie. The scientific picture will be no answer at all to his limited mind, and any attempt to understand it would distress him, bewilder him hopelessly. The hunger in his breast for a definite explanation of the earth would be intensified, but the idea of a God in human form making an enormous mud pie and decorating it to suit his divine taste in such matters appeals to our savage as a heavenly revelation. He can make mud pies himself. So surely God, being no whit less clever than ordinary man, could make a mud pie, infinitely larger and more wonderful. In short, the earth itself. Thereby is the existence of God proved to every reasoning savage mind, and to deny it is heresy. In a precisely similar way, Mr. Van Dusen moves on to his triumphant conclusion. Belief in God. To be sure, there is a suggestion of hysteria in the attitude that demands an explanation for anything, for the sake of one's peace of mind. But if one cannot sleep at night without a final and complete explanation of the universe, why, one answer is as good as another. Science or mud pies will serve equally well. Mr. Van Dusen feels in his heart that the supreme fact of his immediate cosmos is human personality, and that the creator of this universe must therefore be even more truly personal than his creatures. Supra-personal is the word employed. The graduate of Union Seminary takes it for granted that we grasp his meaning. Of course, if we ignore the lower animals, the only personality of which human minds can conceive is inseparable from human conditions, i.e., it must find expression through eyes, mouth, hands, alimentary canal, and, for decency's sake, underwear, soap, and tooth polish. Supra-tooth polish for supra-persons. 3 of them, remember? Yea, verily, this Christian God is a far cry from the poor savage's creator of mud pies. So much for objective evidence. We shall now be treated to pragmatic proof of the divine existence. For the surest proof of God, declares Mr. Van Dusen, is Christianity, and the mightiest evidence for Christianity is the Christian. The faithful believer in Jesus is a living witness to the character of his God, to his love, to his wisdom, and particularly to his morality. According to history, crime and ignorance have advanced a mile under the banner of Christ. For every foot of gain under the standard of Satan. But perhaps the study of history is not emphasized at Union Seminary. The agnostic, by contrast, is a coward and an intellectual sluggard, a despicable creature forsooth, scarcely fit to be mentioned in polite society. The startling mental deficiency of all who call themselves agnostics is proof in itself that Christians are supremely right in their beliefs and admissions. Doubters are continually asking questions to which they find no satisfactory answers, whereas Christians no sooner ask a question regarding life or cosmology than they are answered once and for all by a simple word: God. They can never doubt again. The profoundest scientists that the race has produced are no better than babes, futilely seeking to place their little blocks end to end in a row, a waste of effort, to say the least. The Christian spends no vain effort on arranging silly little blocks. He has one invincible bludgeon, with which he flattens to earth all opponents: faith. By the weight of this bludgeon, he is enabled to build the New Jerusalem and scatter the armies of the Philistines. He need never have a moment's indecision or an instant's doubt as to his final success. He knows. He is a true intellectual. Agnostics may continue to degrade their already weakened minds with doubt, says Dr. Van Dusen. In effect, scientists may keep on trying to pick the locks of universal knowledge with intellectual hairpins. Atheists may strive in vain to force the pearly gates with a view to destroying heaven. The Christian smilingly leaves them all to their pet follies, for to him alone, with his key of faith, the locks of truth will click, and if they shouldn't, he can always force them. Alright, that is the end of book number 1270, Visits Among the Mormons, written by Fred Bair and other writers. Alright, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next book.